There's a whole lot of wisdom out there, particularly in the Eastern traditions, that would say that equanimity, acceptance of what is the pathway to inner peace, maybe even to enlightenment. In fact, there's a Zen Buddhist maxim that would say the great way is easy for one with no preferences. Simple, right? Equanimity. Yet, as an oncology chaplain, I walk beside folks for whom a diagnosis of cancer is automatic entry into the veritable Olympics of acceptance. And Zen masters be damned, every patient I have walked beside most certainly had their preferences. They would have chosen anything other than this. Metastatic cancer at age 42, are you kidding? I'm supposed to accept that? I don't accept it. I don't accept that it happened to me, happened to my family. I want my old life back. Even though resistance to what is, no matter what our circumstances, only deepens and solidifies our suffering. Guarantees it, in fact, leaving us stranded miles away from any oasis we would ever call inner peace. At the same time, we also live in a culture that absolutely reveres self-reliance and abhors what it perceives as self-pity. The thing is, that part of us that is repulsed by what we might call self-pity also robs us from any authentic experience of self-compassion and, in turn, acceptance. The two go together in a dance. While I might have this lofty aspiration for equanimity, I'm also encumbered by these all too human feelings of despair and frustration and sorrow and disappointment and weariness and grief. What about acceptance for those feelings and equanimity? Daryl is newly diagnosed with a rare and aggressive sarcoma, but at this point is absolutely asymptomatic. It's kind of crazy making, Michael. I'm only sick because the doctors tell me I am. I feel great, so what am I supposed to do? Just live my life as normally as I can, right? Still, he's heard enough from his oncologist and read enough to have a sense of what's coming down the pike, and that leaves him scared and sad, of course. But I don't dare feel those feelings, Michael. If I do, I'll go down a black hole and I'll never come out. It's a pretty common perception and coping strategy. But what I find is just the opposite, that when we give our feelings some expression, show them some sunlight, give them some air to breathe, they can lose their power over us. They can loosen their grip from around our throat. They might even offer us a perspective where we can see, they're just feelings. And as the poet Rilke reminds us, no feeling is final. A few years ago, one of the oncologists referred me to Vicky, who was so distressed that the doctor thought she might need a psychiatric evaluation. In any event, Michael, she's up in the infusion clinic now and she's sobbing. Will you please go see her? Well, Vicky had been living with a pretty rare lymphoma for about 15 years. And in those 15 years had been on maybe a dozen different drug protocols. Each one worked for a time and then would stop working. Today was day one of yet another drug protocol, and Vicky was just cooked, absolutely fried. But when I met her, to hear her tell it, Michael, really, I'm so lucky, I'm so blessed, truly, look, at least my cancer's treatable, and look, I have this great oncologist, and I have a wonderful husband, and I have good insurance, and I have great kids and grandkids, and a deep Christian faith, a wonderful church community, really, I'm so blessed. It was like the longer she talked, the less oxygen there was in the room. The rope was getting tighter around her neck because she just couldn't reconcile these all too human emotions of weariness and disappointment and grief, sorrow, with her fierce attachment to her identity as Little Miss Sunshine. What's more, a fierce, even more fierce identity to a belief in positivity above all else. I mean, look at around here, Michael. So many others have it so much worse. Why am I such a crybaby? Absolutely no self-compassion, no grace, allowance to just be a human being in a hard situation with more questions than answers. It was as if she were trying to compose a symphony called Vicky, but had decided that only these 4 or 5 notes would be used. will only use these sweet high notes of gratitude and hope and joy, appreciation, forgiveness. There is no room for any deep, dark notes of despair, frustration, resentment, anger. It takes all 88 keys on a piano to write a full-bodied symphony. A few dark notes in the symphony of Vicky does not make her less of who she is. It makes her more. The way I see it, this is a kind of dance between self-compassion and acceptance in constant movement. I'm reminded of a toy I had when I was a little boy. It was a gizmo with a trigger on it. You pulled the trigger and a little card spun around very quickly. And on one side of the card might be the image of a bird, and maybe on the other side a bird cage, but as they spun around, it looked like the bird was in the cage. Each side of the card was telling the truth for what it was. This is a bird, this is a bird cage. But we only got the complete picture through the dance. What if it's like that with acceptance and self-compassion? The older I get, I tell you, the more depth of meaning, resonance I find in deceptively simple song lyrics in very old songs, written by the masters of the Great American Songbook, the Gershwins, Jerome Kern, Rodgers and Hart, Cole Porter. Songs I might have called corny once upon a time. Irving Berlin was one such master. Let's face the music and dance. Before the fiddlers have fled, before they ask us to pay the bill, and while we still have a chance, let's face the music and dance. Maybe I have been diagnosed with metastatic cancer or some other horrific tragedy has befallen me. Maybe it's incumbent upon me to accept, to face the music, if you will, but to also dance with it, to dance with all of it, with all the sorrow and the disappointment and the anger and the grief, but also with the love and the hope that might be there beneath it all when everything else has burned away. Maybe through that dance, I can move closer to that great way the Zen masters describe, of having no preferences. A few years ago, there was a gal, Kelly, who used to come to my spiritual reflection group every week, and she would often say, I hate that word acceptance. I don't accept that I have cancer. To me, acceptance implies that I approve, and I don't approve. I will never approve that I have this diagnosis. I acknowledge that I have it, but I don't accept it. I got my own vivid lesson in acceptance 7 years ago, almost to the day, I think. I had the most magnificent solo journey to Nepal and Bhutan. And the second to the last day of my trip, I had probably one of the most splendid, perfect days of my life. Along with my guide and my friend Saiwang, we hiked up to Tiger Nest Monastery in Paro. It's a magnificent 17th century Buddhist monastery, perilously hanging and improbably hanging off the side of a mountain, and it's only accessible by foot. It's quite an arduous climb to get there, not unlike climbing to the top of Yosemite Falls. It's a place of religious pilgrimage. All Bhutanese people are expected to make that climb if they can, at least once in their lifetime. Saiwang and I made it up the side of the mountain. We took our shoes off before we entered the gate. The first thing I saw when I went into the first anteroom was this gigantic orange tabby cat snoozing in the one shaft of sunlight coming in through a narrow slit of a window, right next to a monk tending the altar. Saiwang showed me around a little bit, and then we sat down in the great hall and meditated for a time. And then we lit some butter lamp candles, sending up prayers for loved ones, my mom, some beloved patients. With our spirits full to the brim, we descended back down the mountain, talking every step of the way. And then I was treated to the most luscious hot stone herbal bath in a wooden tub at the family farm of my driver, Sonam Tubgai. And after this delicious soak, I got to enjoy a home-cooked meal with him and his family and with Saiwang. Like I say, it was a perfect day. The next day, I was supposed to fly from Paro back to Kathmandu, spend the night, and the next day catch my long flight home to Los Angeles. I got up that morning, I pulled back the curtains. Oh my God, it was so gorgeous. The whole landscape was blanketed in white. It had snowed all night. Look at that, it's so beautiful. And just think, Michael, if it had happened yesterday, you couldn't have had that wonderful hike. But then it didn't stop snowing. Uh-oh. What if my plane doesn't leave? I got packed, I got downstairs, Saiwan picked me up, I'm a little frantic. Saiwan, can we call the airport? Do you think my flight's gonna leave? What do you think? I don't know. Sorry, Michael, we cannot call the airport. They insist that you go in person. And I'm sorry to say that it's against the law for me to go in the airport with you. I will say goodbye at the door. Oh, now some panic's starting to kick in. What if I miss my flight? I'd had that aisle seat selected for months. Those Airbus 380s have 15 seats across in coach. If they move me to another flight, I'll be in the middle. I won't be able to survive that. Just calm down, Michael. Breathe. I wasn't expecting a impromptu pop quiz in Buddhist philosophy at this point. But I had to say, I can't do anything about it. Just breathe. Oh, look at the children playing in the snow. They're so happy to get out of school early. Get to the airport. I have a rather tearful goodbye with Saiwan, which doesn't exactly feel like goodbye because I'm not sure I'm leaving. He says he'll wait in the parking lot for an hour or so and make sure everything gets under control. I go in the terminal, becomes readily apparent there's no electric power. There's no screens illuminated, there's no lights, there's no PA system. There's one teeny woman behind a desk and 300 disgruntled crazy passengers in front of her. Now, I have to say Bhutan is the most Buddhist culture imaginable. It's not just a religion, it's not a way of life. Somehow it's in the DNA. I've never seen anything like it. When I waited through this impossibly long line, I get up to the desk. She looks at me with this kind, sweet smile. Yes, sir, how may I help you? As if she hasn't just been dealing with every disgruntled person in the world and has all the time in the world. Well, I explained to her I have to get back to Los Angeles. I have this aisle seat and my flight leaves from Kathmandu tomorrow. Yes, sir. And then she explained that if the flight is canceled, the airline will have to put us up in a local hotel for the night. But there's a chance you could get a flight tomorrow morning back to Kathmandu and make your connecting flight. Thank goodness Saiwan was still out in the parking lot. He could drive me to the new hotel. At least I didn't have to wrestle with all the shuttle buses. Get to the hotel, get in my room. It's pretty clear there's no electricity there either. There's a blackout all over Paro. There's no heat, there's no hot water, there's no light, there's no internet. No way to let Scott know I'm going to be late. Can't let work know I'm going to be late. And it is so cold. I put every article of clothing I brought on and got under the covers just to keep my teeth from chattering. This little quiz was going on longer than I was really hoping for. To say, just be in the moment, there's nothing you can do about it. But as the afternoon wore on, I realized I've got no way to see in here. There was a candle in the room, but no match. And I certainly wasn't going to use what was left with my cell phone flashlight. So I trudged through the snow back up to the lodge to see if they have a match. And at the same moment, a man walks in the lodge who appears to be from the airport, a little hand computer in his hand. Excuse me, I nabbed him before anybody else could. Are you from the airport? Can you tell me, do you think my flight's going to leave tomorrow morning? Oh, yes, sir, but of course. But first, tell me, how do you like the hotel? How do I like the hotel? My inner ugly American was starting to find his voice. Well, it's very nice, but it's cold, and there's no heat, and there's no hot water, and I'm hungry, and there's no internet. Yes, sir, he says so kindly. All over Paro, there's no heat. There's no hot water. Said with all the equanimity and compassion he could muster. It was so striking to me, I thought of calling this talk, How Do You Like the Hotel? It's an attribute to which I can only aspire. I just don't think I have that in me. Happily, my flight did leave the next morning. I got a window seat, magnificent view of Mount Everest as I sailed by, sapphire blue sky, land in Kathmandu. They rushed me through security. I run up the gangway, get on the plane, and they close the door right behind me. I made it. My grandma Ann, my mom's mom, was a born worrier. She worried about everybody and everything her whole life. Toward the end of her life, she'd had a lot of health problems, a lot of surgeries. I went to see her in the hospital after one surgery or another, and they wouldn't let me in the recovery room, but I could talk to her over the threshold. I remember, how you doing in there, Gram? Honey boy, you get yourself all worked up over these things and it's just never as bad as you think it's going to be. Took her 83 years to come to that simple, profound wisdom. I have the capacity to respond to life. However it is, I'll work it out. I got a lesson a few years later in self-compassion, one I wouldn't have chosen. January 3rd, 2020, it's my first day back to work after the New Year holiday. I'm driving home from the infusion clinic in Santa Monica, going east on Santa Monica Boulevard. As I cross Barrington, a woman runs the red light, smashes into my driver's side door with me on the other side of it, totaling my then 13-year-old Prius, a car from which I had hoped to squeeze a few more years, so much so that I had just put $5,000 into it for a replacement hybrid battery and new tires, a total loss. Happy New Year. So I had to spend money I didn't want to spend and get a replacement used car, and it was nice to have a nicer used car. I'm not exactly a car person, but I really hated spending that money. Christmas Eve, 2020, remember, height of pandemic, no vaccines yet, everybody's home and locked down. It's 5:30 in the afternoon. I hear what sounds like an explosion in the front of our house. The whole house shook. Oh my God, what's that? But I had this sinking feeling, no, no, no. I run out in front of the house. The whole neighborhood's already out in the street. Some kid running a drug deal gone bad had smashed into my new car with such velocity that he knocked it clear in front of the neighbor's house. No! I could only scream. God bless Taylor, my next door neighbor. He's just the person you want in such a scene, takes all the information down, gets the pictures, talks to the cops, he's doing everything, and I'm just melting down. And he just keeps saying to me, Michael, it's okay. Michael, it's okay. I finally snapped. Taylor, quit saying that. There's absolutely nothing about this that's okay. God bless Lisa across the street. She comes up right behind me, whispers in my ear, you're absolutely right, Michael. There's nothing about this that's okay. Sometimes you just need your feelings affirmed. You know what I mean? But still, I had no capacity to accept this reality. And I'm one who has a very low tolerance for injustice, particularly what I consider spiritual injustice. I mean, look at what I do for a living, for crying out loud. Is it too much to ask that I could have one car totaled, have to spend money I didn't want to spend to get a replacement car, and keep that car nice for longer than 10 months? Apparently, yes. And everyone whom I told about this accident responded, as you might imagine, oh, just be grateful you weren't in the car. At least you're safe. It's just a car. It's only stuff. It's just money. And the more I heard it, the more I wanted to kill people. Because I knew they were right, and I wasn't remotely close to that perspective. Not at all. It took me a good week to come up with a word to even accurately describe how I felt. Forsaken. I felt spiritually forsaken, bereft. And because it was holiday time, the insurance company took a good week to get a tow truck out to tow that wreckage out from in front of the house. So every day I went out to get the mail or to get the paper, I confronted with that violence, with that wreckage, with that spiritual injustice taunting me. And when they finally did come to tow it away, I amazed myself. I just sobbed as if they were wheeling my dead mother out of the room. And I'm not a car person at all. I go in the house and I just wept. Scott was so dear and he just held me. I was embarrassed. I said, Scott, you know, this isn't about the car, right? He says, yeah, I know. I was forsaken. I swim every day, partly for fitness, partly for my own sanity, but I'm kind of religious about it. And during the pandemic, it was really challenging to find a place to swim with the gyms closed. So for a while, I was schlepping out to Glendale. They had a community pool that was open with strict precautions. Every day I had to scramble to get a reservation to swim for 45 minutes. I drive out there, go swim, driving home, thoroughly disgusted with myself that nothing I can do, can I let any of this go? I'm driving down Forest Lawn Drive past two enormous cemeteries, Mount Sinai and Forest Lawn, having a little talk with myself. Look up there, Michael, there's hundreds of thousands of dead people. They'd give anything to be back in a body dealing with something as stupid as your car. Doesn't that put this into some perspective? No. And in that, a light bulb kind of went on. My goodness, this is a deep wound. This isn't about a car. This is something else. It's incumbent upon me to be tender with that wound, to be curious about it, to be with it without the need to judge it or compare it or fix it. And with that realization, I started to float a little bit and could inch closer towards something that could be called acceptance. It can be really hard sometimes to feel feelings we would really prefer not to have, really uncomfortable feelings, anger, resentment, bitterness, jealousy, vengefulness, sorrow, especially when those feelings aren't exactly congruent with societal norms and conventions. We want so desperately to be strong and to move on and get past it, but those feelings are not going away. And sometimes I think we just have to move through that doorway of expression and self-compassion, and maybe that can lead to the great way. Because you know what? Soon we'll be without the moon, humming a different tune. And then there may be teardrops to shed, but while there's moonlight, music, love, and romance, let's face the music and dance. So be it.